Alex here with a legal nuts and bolts video on expert witnesses. Expert witnesses can be used in any case, which is why I'm classifying it here, but most of the examples that I'm going to cover are, well, there are only two examples that I'm going to cover, are from high conflict child custody cases. So just keep in mind that even though I'm using those examples, this applies to any type of case. I've got a video on witnesses already. If you haven't seen that video, please watch it now, because that's kind of where I cover some of the basic underlying principles, at least with regards to my own approach when it came to picking out witnesses to bring to court. But for expert witnesses, I really didn't have a whole lot to say because I really only had my personal example. And in my case, I kind of feel like it was a lot of luck. And I also didn't really have to go through the full expert witness experience, because in this case the expert witness was willing to appear, and she was even willing to appear for free. So these are not ordinary situations. Well, one of my viewers who I've been sort of helping through his case had the complete opposite example, or well, yeah, it's his example. Had the complete opposite situation where he had to seek out multiple expert witnesses and he had to pay them their expert witness fees. And all three of them appeared in court and testified. I believe it was three, possibly four. They appeared in court and testified, and it gave me a lot of insight to sort of see what he went through. And also, I took a little bit of input from this user. And by the way, I did talk about this particular situation in a recent live stream. I think I called it Viewers Victory #1. I'm hoping to do more of those. So you could also take a look at that live stream if you want to see sort of the background of this person's case. Starting out with some house cleaning, expert witnesses require, at least with regards to the rules of civil procedure in Nevada, and most likely other states are going to have similar additional requirements on top of any ordinary lay witness. They require some kind of above and beyond disclosure. I know that witness lists have to be provided regardless, whether it's a lay or expert witness, but expert witnesses specifically require, at least in Nevada, the disclosure that they are going to be used as an expert and what precisely it's going to be that they're going to be rendering an expert opinion on. I'm not going to bring up the technical details, because the dates and times as to when these disclosures have to be made and the method as to how they have to be made may differ in different states and may change in Nevada. But it's most likely going to be something that's provided at least 5 or 10 days prior to trial. It might be included in something like the pretrial memorandum. It may be something that's filed separately. I've mentioned in the video statutes, rules, and case law how important it is to look into these little details. Otherwise, you could find yourself totally unable to use any witnesses at all, not just expert witnesses, but any witnesses or exhibits at all, if you just don't have a clue and you just go to court representing yourself and don't realize that certain things have to be disclosed prior to the evidentiary hearing or trial. It does happen to people. I've seen videos where it's happened to people, and it's pretty sad. They just show up with their witnesses and none of them can talk. None of them can testify. And they may have all kinds of documentation. Well, none of it can be admitted. So anyway, please look into the rules of civil procedure of your state, or if you have trouble sort of figuring out where to start, you can go to like a self-help center, find out if there's a lawyer in the library program. These are the things that they're actually quite useful. These sorts of resources are actually quite useful for. I mentioned in my videos, my various different videos, I think the one I'm thinking about right now is self-help centers, that they're not really that good at helping you analyze your case, because when it gets to complicated issues, they just sort of seem to just kind of stare and nod. That was my experience. I went and saw 2 of them at the Lawyer in the Library, which was hosted in the Self-Help Center. But when it comes to like really simple technical procedural stuff, they were quite helpful, like how to serve something and how to, send it in the mail and do a proof of service. Little things like that they're quite useful for. So they'll probably be useful for helping people understand sort of how to declare an expert witness and notify the other side at the court that an expert witness is going to be used. The other big thing is, at some point, that expert witness is going to have to show that they have, I think the word is foundation. There has to be some kind of foundation demonstrating that the expert is actually an expert in what it is that they're going to give an opinion on. Lay witnesses just testify as to what they saw, what they heard, stuff like that. Expert witnesses testify on particular subject matter that they're experts in. And their opinions have weight in that area because they're experts in that particular field or area. So there is a part of the process that requires, I wish I could say for sure, but I'm in a way glad because it may change or it may be different in all 50 states. If you have to do this prior to the actual evidentiary hearing or trial, or if you have to do it at the evidentiary hearing or trial when they're on the stand, it may be something that depends. It may be something where it has to be done prior to the evidentiary hearing or trial, unless the other side objects to something about what you've disclosed, in which case you may have to also question that expert witness in court as to why they're even an expert. These are things to look into. It's not. There's two other things I want to mention on this. From what I've seen, there isn't some formula in place that if certain criteria are met, the expert is now magically an expert, that there's nothing a court can do about it. There have been situations where I've looked into case law or other cases where people were frustrated because their expert had, I don't know, a bachelor's, master's, PhD, and did all these, reports and everything, and they still had to question the expert and convince the court they were an expert. Other situations where the expert didn't have any kind of formal educational background at all, yet when they came into court, they testified as to whatever their expertise was, and the court made a finding that they were an expert. So, for example, like a mechanic or something. My understanding is there isn't some sort of checklist that you go through that all expert witnesses are subjected to when they go to court. It's kind of one of those things that's quite open to the judge's interpretation, or you get the idea. It's just one of those things that it's not clear cut as to how you're going to have to go about showing that an expert witness is an expert in that particular subject matter that you're trying to have them render an opinion on. The other thing when it comes to experts is the fee is different. For lay witnesses, it's in the statutes. In Nevada at this time, I believe it's $26 plus 26 cents for every mile that they have to travel. Experts, there isn't really a set amount on. It seems that you just sort of have to pay what's reasonable for the expert's time. If you do not pay the expert, my understanding is that you could go to court and try and have the judge order the expert to appear at a certain dollar amount. My understanding is you could do that, but I don't think anyone actually does do that because the expert might get angry or sabotage the case. It sucks to have to say that, but I think there's a reason that people don't force experts to appear at a rate that they didn't want. Or even, anytime you're forcing a witness to appear like that, it's risky. Of course, it does have to happen in some situations, but when it comes to experts, it might be even more risky because they're not just testifying as to what they saw and heard. They're going to render an opinion that could very well control the entire outcome of your case. It's much harder to get around that. Once the expert testifies in a way that's damaging to the case, it's almost impossible to fix that or go around it with just any old random other witness, especially in the middle of your trial. You're not going to be able to get another expert to say the opposite now. You may have to rely on the other side's expert, which is most likely going to testify in their favor. So think about that before you try to have an expert appear and forced to testify at a rate that they think is less than what they deserve. I know that I've said this before, you have to look at your statutes, rules, and case law. And what I'm about to say right now kind of goes along with that, because I have heard of certain situations where certain experts are used in court over and over and over again. And there's either some kind of court rule or some kind of statute or something that makes it so that the courts can bypass the whole process of having that expert testify and prove that they're an expert. I think that this is done in certain jurisdictions, in certain criminal cases, where certain maybe forensic experts or something show up in court all the time. And it may be possibly in certain family type cases where certain, I don't know, child psychologists or other experts in those areas appear in court and testify all the time. I've heard of situations where certain courthouses or jurisdictions in particular make it make extra rules or certification processes or something. It's hard to say because there's no formal uniform standard to this, but I've heard that they create some kind of a scheme where that expert can just come back and just automatically, once they sit down and start testifying, just automatically be assumed to be an expert just to save time, because it's one of those situations where they've got that type of case coming into court all the time and they don't need to go and question that expert for an hour or two every single time, asking the same questions, the judge making the same decision. They've already decided this person's an expert in the last 2,346 cases, so they're going to do the same thing now. Be careful if you're, look into that, because that may be something that you can use to your benefit, or it may be something that you may need to figure out how to get around if you're on the other side of that coin and it's one of those experts who's just considered an automatic authority in their field. You may need to figure out if you can even sort of question the fact that that expert's even an expert. These are things that I know exist, but I have not really looked really carefully into. So with that, I think I can go into my two examples now. The first one was my case, which is the one that I mentioned. It's remarkable that it happened to me, but I don't think this is a situation that many people are gonna, run into. I took my son to a dentist, and this dentist loved kids, like really loved kids. She was so good with him and any other child that came to her pediatric dentistry office, and it showed. It really did. And when she saw the neglect that my son was suffering from, and that he needed 5 crowns and 2 extractions, and they had seen how crazy my ex was because she'd caused a few scenes in there. She didn't sort of volunteer to appear in court, but it did eventually come up, and she said, I'll just show up for free. She didn't even charge me, and she really did. She came to court and testified for free as an expert, and she made my case. She was basically the reason. Like, there were a lot of other reasons, there were a lot of other things I proved in court, but that was the big thing, that I had an expert in there that said, I am a dentist, I'm an expert in child dentistry. I think I said pediatric dentistry, right? This child needed 5 crowns, 2 extractions. It was not cosmetic. My ex had the gall to say it was cosmetic. The dentist was, this is not cosmetic at all, not even close. That she would have reported us to CPS if she wasn't confident that I was taking care of it through the court system. And that she, there was something else she said that was profound. Oh, she said that my ex, that there was no way that I could make up for the fact that my ex wasn't brushing his teeth, with my ex having so much time. So she basically said that for this child's teeth to remain healthy, his ex's custodial time is going to have to be drastically reduced, because she can't be trusted to brush his teeth. When you get to the point of 5 crowns and 2 extractions at age 7, the neglect is just so egregious. So anyway, in my case, that's what happened, and I can't really tell my viewers, go out there and find people who love kids and get them to testify for free as an expert, because it's not likely to happen. But the viewer that I helped, he went through this sort of the ordinary way. He went and did his research and found multiple experts, and he was able to provide some insight into how he did that. Now, there's a lot of little teeny tiny details as to what went into it, but there were 2 or 3 big things that he mentioned. The first thing he mentioned was somewhere along the line we had a discussion with regards to pouring money into an attorney versus pouring money into experts, if you have to choose one or the other. Now, I want to just mention that he ended up going along with both. He had an attorney and he paid his experts, but it was one of those situations where I used the analogy. It's like, an expert is so important, and the problems with attorneys in family law cases is so pervasive that if you have to choose between one or the other, I would say definitely choose the expert. The attorney, you have a good chance of ending up hiring a settler that doesn't know how to litigate. You have a good chance of hiring an incompetent attorney who just wings it. Wing it lawyers. I have a great video on what happens when you hire a wing it lawyer. It's just, the chance of pouring money into something that really doesn't help you that much, I hate to say it, is pretty high. And when it comes to the expert, if you know you need an expert and you have to choose between a really high chance of hiring an incompetent attorney versus hiring an expert and bringing him to court, it's kind of a no-brainer for me. Choose the expert. It's going to be hard, but if you show up in court with that attorney and no expert, the attorney most likely he's going to even want to go to court because he's going to think you can't win. A lot of times this happens. People hire these high-priced attorneys, and the attorney kind of represents them a little bit in the beginning. They do some great negotiating, it falls through, and then court comes, and all of a sudden the attorney's like, you need to take this deal. Take this deal. You can't prove any of this. It's not going to go anywhere. It could blow up in your face, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, the first thing he mentioned was that had a really strong impact on him. It made him realize how important experts were in his particular case, where he had an ex with a personality disorder diagnosed, not just him saying it. And there were a whole lot of other issues going on with serious neglect issues, failure to thrive. And there were a lot of agencies involved, not just CPS, but I guess hospital agencies and other things like that. So the second thing that he mentioned is how he went about finding one. And this was really kind of obvious in a sense, because he went and looked through psychological resources, and one in particular was Psychology Today. I guess it was like a magazine or a journal or something. But what I found profound is that he actually started to notice a pattern. The disorder that his ex had was a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, I believe, or it may have been what they call nondescript personality. It's like a person. The person's diagnosed with a personality disorder, but they're not sure which one it is. There's a name for it. I can't remember what it is. But anyway, he started to notice that as he contacted these different experts, potential experts, a lot of them didn't have really a deep understanding on what narcissistic personality disorder was and how it worked. And one of the things he said is he started to realize that it was probably because, and this is in hindsight, because it's so difficult to treat, because it's incurable. Very few experts really look into it much because, number one, narcissistic personality disorder people don't usually go and get treatment. The nature of being narcissistic kind of gets in the way of that. And the second thing is, when they do get treatment, they don't really try to better themselves or solve the problem. They try to use the treatment provider in the same way that they use any other victim or any other target that they would use. They try to exploit them and get narcissistic supply from them. So this sort of made it so that very few providers know anything much about narcissistic personality disorder aside from just the label. So he did eventually find one, and that person kind of blew his mind and happened to be pretty close. That person happened to be, I don't know how close, but I think it was within a 1 or 2 hour drive of his courthouse. So he paid that expert, and I'm pretty sure that this principle was applied to the other experts that he went and had commanded to appear in court as well. But I'm not quite sure because I believe they may have already been involved anyway for other reasons. One of them was an expert who had already treated his ex, and I think the other one may have also been a different expert who'd already treated his ex. They had different they were involved in different ways. The one that he did research on was the one that knew how narcissistic personality disorder worked and was able to describe to the court why this was going to be a problem in the child custody case. So I think that is something that matters a lot. This experience and this process that he went through matters enough that I'm ready to do a video on expert witnesses, and I hope that other people find it helpful. The process of finding experts is one of the hardest parts of any case, because it's so difficult to find one that you can trust, and also because it's so expensive. They cost a lot to, if they're worth their salt, they cost a lot. So I suppose at this point I don't have much else to add when it comes to using experts in court. If anyone here wants to post in the comments below, feel free to do so. I think this is one of those areas where I really need a lot of feedback from others who are going through this right now. Yeah, if anyone here has any experiences, any kind of feedback, if anyone has even negative, if you tried to find experts and you had problems with it, if you had, or even if you had to deal with experts who testified on your opponent's side and you have some insight as to some negatives from that perspective as to, or anything at all when it comes to expert witnesses. I just didn't have enough personal experience using them, and so it's one of those areas where the community is going to have to really come together if people want to help each other with this topic. um, Aside from me knowing that there's a whole lot of discussion on experts in the rules of civil procedure in Nevada, there's a whole lot of case law even on all sorts of things when it comes to experts, between when they've been disclosed to issues as to whether or not they should have even been certified or approved or recognized as an expert by a trial judge. All this stuff, that it's all out there, and I've read it all, but for me, it's purely academic. It's not something that I really trudged through in my own case. My expert just fell right into my lap, and I'm really glad that that happened, because I'm not sure that I could have gotten very far without that dentist. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and end this video for real this time, and I'll see you guys next time.